Conversations with Azu Ishekwele.
Hello. The world is on a high with an overdose of armed conflicts, trade wars, and multifarious threats. Much credit for this must go to President Donald Trump of the United States, who keeps throwing flames into already burning fires. For instance, he encouraged Iranian protesters thus. Help is on the way, as the Pentagon ordered battleships to deploy towards the Arabian Gulf. But Trump has not helped protesters in 250 planned protests across 46 American cities to demonstrate against immigration and customs enforcement, also known as ICE agents. Fatal shootings and injuries have occurred in Minnesota and Minneapolis, where live TV footage poses the incredulous question: is this the US of A? Almost worse than former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi did when the Arab Spring was instigated in Benghazi in 2011, Trump has described protesters as insurrectionists, anarchists, and thugs who are rioting and looting. The same Trump who is adding oil to protest fires in Iran. Now he wants to dispatch senior officials from the U.S. State Department to Mali in order to drive a wedge between the Sahelian states and their new ally, Russia. This is a direct effort to undermine ECOWAS' attempts to enforce democratic rule across West Africa. This is not about Donald Trump, but in the village where there is only one known chief, everyone has a common suspect when something goes missing. This is Conversation with Azu, a weekly diary on life and politics. Our column is titled, Can We Quench the Fire Like Fire Starts in Mali? And the writer, the most syndicated Nigerian columnist, author and journalist par excellence, Azu Ishekwele, is here with me to take some questions. Hello, Azu.
Thanks for having me once again, Julian. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So we go. From the Maghreb to the Sahel to the West Coast and Central Africa, the US has been implicated in subversion pre- and post-independence. With Donald Trump, it seems to be getting worse, isn't it?
Well, there's a short and there's a long answer to that question. I think the short answer is that it appears.
Okay.
It appears so, but there's a much longer version. You remember that President Donald Trump came to power with a promise, of peace, that he was going to end all wars, and had he been president, for example, the Russia-Ukrainian war might not have happened. But we must also give him credit for the role he played at some point in the Israel Palestinian conflict. He played some role there in bringing some sort of peace to that. We must give him credit for that. But of course, people have had to genuinely ask themselves questions about what appears to be a clear departure from his promise not to drag America through. There's been no shooting war, instigated since or at his behest or since he became U.S. president. But the amount of the geopolitical tensions have been such that the entire world feels as if it's perpetually at war every day the world wakes up. And that's exactly the feeling that people get. And of course, the latest point of concern or of interest for me, which I expressed in the article that you have referred to, is the fact that, a senior official of the U.S. Department of State for Africa will be coming as an envoy of President Trump to Mali for redirection, and now also to correct the missteps, to use the phrase that was used in the article that was published in the BBC. I find that extremely curious, especially because, of course, of the sort of background that you have given, the situation in the Sahelian states and the conflict that that's been ongoing for in the last 3 or 4 years, especially since a number of the states around that region have been involved in military coup, and the several attempts by ECOWAS and the EU to solve the problems. Unfortunately, the problem has been protracted for many reasons. Part of it may be haste, but it may also be partly also related to sabotage by interest that we probably will talk about as this interview progresses.
So I learned the phrase delinquent Sahelian states from you. And part of your concern, I must state, is that the US seems to be seen in the midst of the effort ECOWAS is making to maintain peace in the sub-region. The US seems to be seeing democracy can go to hell with the current, overtures it is making to Mali, Niger, and
Burkina Faso.
Yes. This is like one trouble too many for the ECOWAS sub-region.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, there are those who have tried to rationalize or justify the rush of coups that we have experienced, actually throwback to the 80s and early 90s, to the fact that the governments themselves, the democratically elected governments that have been overthrown in these countries, have failed their people in terms of what they have delivered, in terms of the what we commonly call dividends of democracy. But if two wrongs don't make a right, you don't add a third. And that's my firm belief. We have seen and know the history of military rulers. There have been a few exceptions, but not many exceptions, in my view, to justify a return to military rule. If in African states, of course, there is the need to make it plain that civilian governments or democracy or elections are just a piece, just one of the things that need to happen for a society to be governed properly. So after elections, the people also ought to be able to hold the people who have elected them accountable for the promises that they have made. I think there's been no doubt serious failure of governance across the continent, and in fact, there's a huge loss of confidence in institutions across the world, and that goes way beyond Africa. But to come back to the point at issue, I think that what should have been done by the United States and other countries was to pursue, to see how they could rally around ECOWAS and perhaps the EU to solve the problems in those countries in such a way that democratically elected governments can return at the earliest possible time. But what we are seeing in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, and also in Chad and a number of those countries, is a transformation of the military rulers to see in civilian clothes. They are casting aside their military uniforms for civilian clothes, and which we've seen a lot of that, and that really does not end well. It doesn't end well, not for the citizens, and certainly not for the sub-region.
All right. The three states, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, imposed retaliatory visa bans on U.S. citizens when Trump included them in the countries with visa restrictions. Now, to cite the BBC article you referred to in your column, which says Nick Checker, the head of the U.S. State Department's Bureau for African Affairs, would visit Mali to convey the United States, quote, respect for Mali's sovereignty and chart a new course in relations, moving past policy missteps, which you just referenced earlier. This typically sounds like what our people would call wayo.
Indeed. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out, because, as you said, the three Sahelian countries that form what is now known as the Alliance of Sahelian States were among the countries that President Trump included in his complete ban list. And of course, there's one other country, Sierra Leone, which is not in the Sahel, but which was also affected. And there are about 7 other countries outside the Sahel, including Nigeria, which are affected by partial bans. And so you ask yourself, what is the change of course? What are the misdirected steps that the U.S. official is coming to? Would it include, for example, a review of the complete visa ban on the Sahelian countries on that list that have also retaliated? Will it also, how will that potentially affect the relationship with Russia? France is already frozen out. It's frozen out and out in the cold. I think it's happy to be where it is and just to watch how things play out. But how does that affect Russian interest in the Sahel? I see clearly, in my view, that this is just more than geopolitics. It's also a battle, a struggle for critical minerals. All right, so which really is at the heart of this overture by the White House. That's my view.
All right. I'll bring you an excerpt from this article so you could, for your enjoyment and listening pleasure. And I quote, "The motive of the US is not a stable, cohesive, and interdependent sub-region capable of deepening trade and cooperation. It's yet another subversive attempt by Trump's administration to smash, grab, and convert any critical resources that it can find at any cost." End of quote. Now, Niger in particular had sent out about
800, yes.
800 American troops because President Biden had called Niger to order to say they should restore democratic institutions. Now, Trump is going back in a manner that suggests that, okay, it is democracy does not count for anything. It is either, just as I put it now, minerals or nothing. Now, is this diplomacy, or what do we call this?
I don't know what it is. I'm sure that it's also, as I said in my column, it's hardly a reflection of the Machiavellian model of
the end justifies
of the end, justifying the means, because the US prides itself, and we have many countries around the world had seen it as a city on the hill, as a country that has exceptional qualities and its policy of as a standard bearer, and for its exceptionalism as the beacon of the world and of all the values that of freedom and of human rights and of justice and of respect for the rule of law and multilateralism, which is what we thought, I guess it's what it is. We're in a different world from the one that we were in about 2 years ago, and so what is happening in many parts of the world, whether it's in the Sahelian states, or whether it's in Alberta in Canada, or whether it's in Venezuela or wherever else it's happening, appears to be the new normal, which is very tragic and sad for the world.
Will the states really jilt Russia for the United States? Like that?
Very, very unlikely. Whatever the relationship that the Sahelian states are currently enjoying with Russia, it may not be all they wished for, but I'm not sure they want to gamble that for any roller coaster ride with the US currently.
And finally, are we likely to experience a rush of coups as a result of this?
Well, I think that the bulwark actually against that is not what US. It's not necessarily what US does or does not do under its current administration, because I'm not so sure that many people are looking towards that part of the world again for any kind of meaningful leadership. I think that ultimately, the survival of democracy in Africa and elsewhere will depend on that social contract between governments and citizens, on governments committing to delivering what they have promised to deliver to the people, and of such governments, whatever they fail to do so, a system that also makes them accountable, that holds them accountable, and makes change of government through the democratic process also much easier than it's been.
All right, to conclude, for more on these articles, go to reshape.com and don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave your comments for us. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me once again, Julia. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Conversations with Azu Ishekwene.